Gary Kent is the owner of Meridian Land Surveying LLC, and he also works part-time for Snyder. He the bio says is the current chair, but he is now the past chair of both the NSPS and ALTA committee on ALTA, ACSM, now NSPS standards since 1995. He just gave that up, resigned from that position February of last year, actually, he said. He has been a past president of both ACSM and ISPLS from 1999 to 2006. He taught boundary law, legal descriptions, property surveying, and land system survey systems for Purdue University in Indianapolis. He is in his 13th, it's probably more like 14th or 15th year now on Indiana State Board of Registration and Professional Surveyors, and is frequently called on as an expert witness in case involving boundaries, easements, and land surveying practice. Gary regularly presents programs across the country, helped us many a times already on Mentoring Mondays, and we appreciate that. He also writes columns for American Surveyor and contributes to NSPS News and Views. Mr. Kent is joining us from sunny California tonight. He's out there with his family and his granddaughters playing in a golf tournament tonight. So we'll keep it moving for him so he can go finish watching his granddaughter play golf. But I appreciate you jumping on, Gary. Of course, you know, in your busy schedule, you had a conference all week last week for Arizona and Alaska, and so jumping out here again tonight. So one of my favorite topics, like I talked about before, survey and leadership and that leadership style, and I'm looking forward to you presenting on it tonight. So I appreciate your time, Gary.
Absolutely, I appreciate the opportunity. It's Trent knows I've spoken on this topic numerous times in the States, and actually twice in Iceland and once in the Netherlands even. So it's something that's kind of near and dear to my heart, and we see so many poor examples of it that it's worth talking about. There's an author and a management theorist named James O'Toole, who said one time that leaders fail when they have an inappropriate attitude and philosophy about the relationship between themselves and their followers. That those who do not respect and trust their followers cannot lead them. And what I want to talk about today in our little time together here is I'm hoping to accomplish like four things. One is to demonstrate the importance of having a shared sense of purpose in an organization. The second is to outline the responsibilities that leadership has to lay the foundation for that purpose and for the accompanying culture. The third is to describe the importance of the actions of individual people. And then last, to just summarize some characteristics that really people have to exhibit if they're going to be effective leaders. So at Schneider years ago, about 30 years ago, we defined what servant leadership meant for us. It was something that we realized we were missing. We had people even in leadership positions who didn't really understand what it was we were talking about. And so we wrote what I thought was a really, really good definition, but it includes this statement. Servant leadership is a result of the collective deeds and works of solitary individuals who care about others. So we wrote this definition, but servant leadership isn't really about organizations and what they do. It's about the people, right? The individuals and what they do, because after all, what is an organization? What is an institution? What is a family other than a collection of a bunch of people? So the most important individual is always you or me, because we can all be, and we are actually leaders. A lot of times, it's one of the problems we have. A lot of times people don't realize that other people are looking to them as a leader, and they don't realize that that's going on. So let's talk about institutions. I mentioned just a second ago, we create institutions. Why? Well, I was at a session at the annual conference of the Greenleaf Center, which is the Robert K. Greenleaf Center for Servant Leadership. I attended a conference in Atlanta a few years ago, and somebody asked that question. And there were a number of responses, but the one that I thought was the best one was that we create institutions to serve other people or to serve a need. Right? That's why we start companies too, right? We start a survey company to provide a service, to meet a need that we perceive. But what need? Right? And how exactly do we serve them? These are really, really important questions, because those who want to work or who do work within an organization have to know what they're doing there. And while the answer to that may seem ridiculously simple, it's not always. Right? For example, in the United States, we continue to this day a decades-long debate about our schools, secondary schools. Right? They're one of the most important institutions existing anywhere, and yet they're not performing as we would like, which begs the question, why not? Well, I think one reason is that we don't know what we want them to be doing. Do we want them to prepare students for college? Do we want them to teach them to be good citizens? Do we want them to prepare students for a trade or a career? Do we want to teach them critical thinking, which we're totally failing at that? But these are widely differing purposes, right? I mean, one of them is not necessarily complementary to the other one. Each one requires a different strategy. And so a school is destined for mediocrity until we can agree on what we want them to do. The same could be said, for example, about prisons. Why do they exist? Well, let's see, to put serious criminal violators away where they won't be a threat to anyone, or to just punish them for their crimes, or to help them learn a skill or trade while they're serving their time so they can be productive when they get out. What I know about prisons is that there is a high probability that those who are released will, within a year or two, be back. So whatever objective we have is not working. And yet we have the highest incarceration rate of any country in the world. It's crazy. So our intent regarding any institutions may be very purposeful and well-grounded, but to what end, right? The value that our institutions, whether they're public or private, can bring to society is going to be severely limited if they don't have any focus, right? They don't have any sense of direction. And with purpose comes a supporting culture, which is really, really important. Colleen Barrett, who is now the second or third retired president of Southwest Airlines, said one time that the culture of an organization, the culture of an institution is responsible for the results. The culture, right? Not the rules, not the policies, the culture that leadership promotes and demonstrates. So it's up to the leadership, the individual leaders, to provide the foundation for that purpose and for that culture. Author Margaret Wheatley, Meg Wheatley, spoke at another program I was at that led into this Greenleaf conference in Atlanta. She's written some really great books on leadership. They've influenced me a lot, and even actually as related to the content of this program. And she has written that when an organization is faced with a problem, it should go to the employees. It's almost a foregone conclusion that somebody inside the organization already has a solution. And in fact, in a lot of cases, they're already using it. But if the culture of the organization is such that employees are expected to toe the line, follow the rules, you're never going to know, because they're not going to feel empowered enough. They're not going to feel safe enough, trusted enough, or valued enough to share their solutions. So how does a worthy institution last over time? We can't create institutions that mean something if they have no life beyond just the next project or the next contract. We can't promise people, for example, only a few months or a few years of employment and expect the kind of energy and commitment that we would like from them. So in an organization, we don't need more meetings. We need more listening. We have to have time and places where we can come together to discover ideas and identify issues that are significant to each of us. And people aren't communicating well if we just create another website, have another video cam on our computer or whatever, right? Of course, during the pandemic, we didn't have any choice but to adapt, but we can't remain separated because, technology does not connect us. Technology does not connect us. It's relationships that connect us. We share knowledge because we're in a relationship, not because we video conference every day. Once we build the relationships, we can use technology to stay connected. The leaders of a truly successful institution understand those principles, and they constantly work to employ them. Right? It's individuals that power the world for the good and, unfortunately, for the bad also. Although mere individual people, leaders have a distinct responsibility to act in the greater good. They must, as Robert Greenleaf said in his seminal essay called The Servant as Leader, led in a way that helps those those we serve grow as persons, or we want to help those we serve grow as persons so that they, while being served, become healthier, wiser, freer, more autonomous, and more likely themselves to become servants. And to achieve that, leaders have to be able to effectively communicate a vision and, most importantly, listen to those that they aspire to serve. Right? That means listening not only to individuals and understanding their stories, but listening attentively to what there are sometimes their loud demands, and perhaps more often for the words that are not spoken, that express the needs of society or of our institutions. Understanding an institution, an organization, a family, whatever. Having extraordinary listening skills like that is a distinct and uncompromising responsibility of a leader. But the followers, they also have a distinct responsibility, and that one is just as important, if not more so, than the responsibility that the leaders have. And that responsibility is to monitor their leaders, their institutions, and even themselves, to ensure that we are not allowing ourselves to be led down a rosy path to a place that does not serve the greater interests of society, our institutions, or the people in those. Followers have to take it upon themselves to carefully watch what their leaders are doing and ask pointed questions. This can be really unpopular, but a true servant leader will welcome that scrutiny, as long as it's in the interest of the greater good. Like, not simply to play gotcha, or in the case of politics for just political gain. The false leader, who is only after power, or perhaps addicted to it, will lash out when questioned. They're not accepting the scrutiny. The open and accepting attitude of the leader towards the critical examination, the constructive criticism of his or her actions, is a high-level demonstration of servant leadership. If we're to learn from our mistakes and avoid the same ones later, we have to be willing to face them by having them pointed out to us. Because you see, no matter how hard we try to do right and to set the right example, even the best leaders are going to make mistakes. They're going to screw up, because we're all human, right? And leaders have to have the same attitudes towards everyone else. Why? Because even the most well-intentioned, even the most pure and honorable person is not perfect. As Greenleaf said, anyone could lead perfect people. That's easy. In fact, I would argue that's not even leadership. Dealing with the half people, which is what Greenleaf called all of us, dealing with the imperfect people, because that's all there are, dealing with the messiness of real life, with the distractions, with the lack of time, a lack of money, lack of resources, dealing with unjust criticism, and not just dealing with them, but dealing with them with patience, integrity, compassion, understanding, and grace. That is leadership. That is servant leadership. So being a servant leader is more than merely having a vision. It's more than leading when times are great and everybody's happy, because there isn't any challenge to that. Servant leaders have to care about those that they lead. And they can show up most by listening for the needs of their people, for the needs of their institution, for the needs of society. But just as important as listening is, that's not even enough. Acting on what is heard is the next critically important step of a servant leader. Because what good is it to listen if it doesn't provoke any action in response to the identified needs? And that's the part of servant leadership that's often missed. And servant leadership sometimes it gets a reputation of being easy and soft, right? But it's not easy and soft. Servant leadership is not a passive exercise. In fact, what's soft is going to the trouble of listening and then not responding to the needs that are revealed. Listening without corresponding action. What's easy is simply telling people what to do, acting without listening, acting ruthlessly without caring for the well-being of employees or society in general, and without an understanding of the need for human dignity and respect. Unfortunately, we see this type of so-called leadership way too often, certainly in the United States. Leaders also have to be visible. They have to spend time with those that they are leading. If they're invisible, even their best intentions will, at best, be muddled and at worst, be lost or ignored. At that same Greenleaf conference in Atlanta, I heard a story of a high-level manager. He complained to his boss. He said, I can never get in to see him. He said, any low-level worker on the line can get time with you anytime they want, but I can barely even get a minute with you. You know what his boss said to him? He said, well, those people are a little more important than you are. I also heard the story of a leader who had a manager who never took the time to just stop in and say hi to his employees. He was never down on the floor in the mix talking to his employees. You know what he said? I don't have time. I have too much work to do that. He was reminded by his boss. He said, you know what? Those people are your work. Servant leadership is a journey. It's just like our lives are journeys, right? We never get there. Right? We never arrive and say, great, I'm a servant leader now. Let me check that one off my list. Right? Why? Because some days we're going to make more progress than other days. Some days we're going to have to retrace our steps because we took the wrong path. Some days, as I said earlier, we are going to mess up royally. Some days we will say or do the wrong thing. We'll even do things that are contrary to what we believe and what we know to be right. Why? Because we're only human. Try as we might, we're going to make what turn out to be bad decisions. We're going to say things detrimental to our cause and in conflict with our beliefs. Yet while we have to accept the reality of being an imperfect human being, we cannot use as an excuse for bad behavior. We have to constantly monitor and reflect on our words and our actions, make note of what we could have done better, and then most importantly, actually do better next time. It's almost cheating to reflect at the end of the day on what could have gone better. The hard work is actually making it go better in real time while it's happening. Because we're imperfect, right? People are going to blame us for our mistakes. We should expect that. But they will be unforgiving if we do not learn from those mistakes. Something to recognize is that great leadership all by itself is not enough. There have been many great leaders in history, many of whom were ruthless demagogues at best. Yet even the traditional power model of leadership, where power is consolidated in the leader, that's not necessarily bad in and of itself. It's how that power is exercised, to what purpose it is put. That's where the problem occurs. Is power taken and then exercised on behalf of retaining it, getting more of it? Is simply having power the objective? Or is it exercised on behalf of those being led as a means to help things be better for people? Servant leaders do not claim to their position of leadership out of a lust or authority of power, right? Greenleaf actually said that such persons who do that are disqualified to lead because their claim is inherently illegitimate. They are rooted in ego, not in service to others. So although it's pretty hard to define, there are a lot of examples that capture the essence of servant leadership in just a few words. The Reverend Dr. J. Carla Northcutt said this: the goal of many leaders is to get people to think more highly of the leader. The goal of a great leader is to help people think more highly of themselves. A big part of leading in this way involves trusting your employees to do the right thing. You know, if we can't give extraordinary responsibilities to our employees, if we can't trust them to do the right things, why on earth are they working for us? If we don't have that kind of trust, then there's either something wrong with them, or perhaps more likely, there's something wrong with us and how we're leading them. But things can go wrong that way, right? And they do. But as long as the employee had the right motivation in mind, if they make a mistake, we learn from it and we move on. George Washington Carver once said this. I love this. How far you go in life depends on you being tender with the young, compassionate with the aged, sympathetic with the striving, and tolerant of the weak and the strong, because someday you will have been all of those. Someday you will have been all of those. Hallie Bryant, who's one of the great Harlem Globetrotters, was asked one time if he could relate to the kids that he saw in the stands when he played. He said, I see myself in every living person because somewhere along the line, I've been there. So what we're talking about is a strong sense of self-awareness, which is an absolute indispensable characteristic of a servant leader. My favorite quote on self-awareness comes from a Buddhist proverb. It's on the wall in my kitchen. I look at it every morning while I eat breakfast. I tore it out of a magazine in Oslo, Norway. Tore it out of a magazine. The Buddhist proverb, it says, it is better to conquer yourself than to win 1,000 battles. I once read an interview with singer Amy Mann, who said that the greatest barrier to the pursuit of happiness is the lack of self-awareness. There's a little book, The Four Agreements. It's written in 1997 by Don Miguel Ruiz. It's a guide for practicing self-awareness. Some of you may have read it or heard of it. He's got 4 agreements. The first agreement is be impeccable in your word. Ruiz says, speak with integrity, say only what you mean. Avoid using the word to speak even against yourself or to gossip about others. Second agreement, don't take anything personally. He says, nothing that others do is because of you. It's a projection of their own reality, their own dreams onto a situation. When you are immune to the opinions and actions of others, then you won't be the victim of needless suffering, right? We take stuff personally all the time that's not meant for us to take that way. Third agreement, don't make assumptions, right? We make assumptions all the time at work, at home, in the car, at the store, with clients, with everybody we interact. We need to get over that, because we take actions based on what we think we know. The fourth agreement is always do your best. By being more self-aware, we will be better leaders. We have the ability to understand and better deal with whatever comes our way, especially challenges and conflict. Aristotle said, anyone can become angry. That is easy. But to become angry with the right person, to the right degree, at the right time, for the right purpose, and in the right way, that is not easy. So to maybe kind of bring this to a conclusion, Lao Tzu addressed servant leadership in his 6th century BC when he wrote in the Tao Te Ching, when the best leader's work is done, the people say, we did it ourselves. Well, these are the things that we collectively owe to those that we interact with, perhaps most importantly, to ourselves, to understand that meaningful change in the world starts with solitary individuals. To have a vision that is grounded in listening to the needs of everyone with whom we interact. To translate that vision into actions that benefit society. To demand that those who lead us listen, care, communicate, and follow through. To connect with people and treat them with respect and dignity. To accept constructive criticism and even detractors. To be patient, compassionate, and understanding. To exhibit grace and integrity. To be visible in setting the example. To accept the imperfect nature of all persons, including ourselves. To be highly self-aware, to understand others, otherwise we cannot even start our journey. That sounds like a lot of hard work, doesn't it? Well, you know why? Because it is hard work. I'm going to end this, and we could chat. I would love to chat about this, on this with a thought. If we try to identify what somebody should be doing in regards to any of this stuff that we talked about, we miss the point. We totally miss the point, because that someone is you and you and you. We got to understand that someone is me. Trent, I'm going to turn this over. I would love to chat about this and take questions.
Yeah, no, I love it. One of the things you talked about, talking with your employees, it takes me almost an hour to get to my desk every morning by going around and talking to the different people and employees and that kind of stuff, and just asking about family and asking about everything, right, and what we can do to make things better for them, even outside of work, right? I mean, that's ultimately what the whole thing is with servant leadership, is not just 8 to 5, but it's 24 hours a day, and how we can take care of when we hire somebody, we tell them welcome to the family, because it truly is an entire family. And we all, one of the lines I like to use is, every one of us here has to do our job in order to collect that paycheck every 2 weeks, no matter what it is. So it's team member work the entire time. So George had I love this topic, and like you, I could go on and on forever, but I'll let everybody else chime in. Go for it, George.
Okay, Gary, I think I would be one to recommend that you go sit down in Washington, D.C. in front of the whole of our leadership. Although I have the feeling that you'd have a hard time getting most of them to listen, because I don't think they do that very well. But I will tell you what worked well for me with my staff. And I found that, yeah, you can be friends with your staff if there's respect. And as long as there's respect, friendship is there. You have to care, like Trent said. But what I would do with my staff is I would outline the project for them. I'd say, hey, here's what we've got. Here's where we need to end up. I'm trusting you to put this together. I'm not really concerned about how you do it as long as the result we get in the end is correct and right and what needs to be done. I know there's going to be questions. I know there's going to be problems that you're going to run into. My door is open. Please bring them to me. But if you have questions or problems, do me a favor and bring 2 or 3 solutions to those problems along with you for us to discuss. And almost invariably, one of those solutions they would bring would be the one I would pick and the one that needed to be done. And what that accomplished, it allowed them to develop confidence in themselves and me to develop confidence in them. It was a win-win, absolute win-win.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great example of, Trent and I were talking, as it turns out, a lot of people do that sort of thing. They never had a name for it. And, but, in my world, we would call it servant leadership. You don't have to call it that. Some people kind of bridle a little bit at the term because it feels like it has, maybe a religious connotation or something, but, it certainly doesn't have to. It's not setting the example, and encouraging people to make mistakes and to learn from them. And as somebody said, it is all about trust.
Anybody else want to chime in? It's got to be more than just George. There's everybody on here is at some point a leader to somebody, leader to your kids or leader to your family members or whatever.
Yeah,
I'm at the point of trying to conquer myself.
Hey.
Yeah, that whole idea of conquering yourself is really about self-awareness, right? You can't be an effective leader unless you know who you are. It is such a critical thing. I have to understand who I am, because then I understand why I react to things, right? I may react to something in kind of a negative way, and I need to understand myself so that I understand, why do I do that? What is that trigger, so that I'm setting a better example than reacting, for example, defensively to something, or not accepting criticism or something like that. So that whole idea of self-awareness, I think, is absolutely a critical thing. And it takes, it takes being humble, and it takes a very high awareness of yourself to be able to sit back and understand what are my faults, what are my trigger points, why do I react to things the way I do? Because when you do, then you have better control over what you're doing and how you interact with people.
If you guys follow along in the chat, there's quite a bit of stuff going on in the chat as well. I think Jen talked about it. She's interviewed with some informal interviews, and only one company has actually talked about how they kind of help in servant leadership, which we've kind of talked about before on a few of these as well, about company culture and making sure, like in Jen's situation, interviewing with a company and finding out that company culture and see if it fits with you and if it fits with your, your everyday life that works with it. George, you had your hand back up. Go for it.
Okay. What? I never know if I'm muted or not.
Oh, you're good.
An example of reactions. I had a young man that was doing a project for me, doing a mapping project for me, came to me about 2 weeks after the map was recorded. And I was proud of him for coming to me, but he said, hey, I screwed up on that job. I missed part of the boundary. We've got a map file that's not correct. And then he got kind of confused because I didn't get mad. He said, aren't you going to yell and scream at me? And I told him, I said, I'm not sure that would do either one of us any good. We'd both end up being upset and it wouldn't solve the problem. What do you think we ought to do about it? He says, well, I'm going to go back and I'll go through the work to put together the revised amended record of survey on my own time. I said, well, that's awesome, but I'm happy to pay you to do it. Mistakes happen. We're going to learn from this. And he said, well, I still don't understand why you're not upset. And I said, well, I'm not upset because I own this too. I was supposed to review that and I didn't catch it. So it's on both of us. So I'm as interested in getting this right as you are. And I'm proud of you for coming here, and we're both going to learn from this.
Yeah.
Good story.
Yeah, that's a great story. And there's a similar story, and I think it comes out of General Motors from decades ago. When they launched some program, and I don't remember if it was going to be some new vehicle or something, and it didn't go well. And the guy who was in charge of it was some senior VP or something, and they ended up dumping like $200 million into it, and it failed, right? And shortly thereafter, he got called to the like the president's office. And he's like, well, I guess this is it. They're going to can me on this. And he went in, and the president talked with him, and they chatted about what they could do and next time and all this stuff. And then that was it. And he was kind of confused. And the president looks at him and says, what's wrong? He goes, well, shoot, I thought you were going to fire me. And the president says, fire you? I just spent $200 million training you. So
yeah, exactly.
It's exactly what you're talking about. Yeah,
that is awesome. I along those same lines, one of my number one life mottos is don't cry over spilled milk, and for that same exact reason, right? Just doesn't do anybody any good to get pissed off and upset over most situations. 99% of the situations, right? Very few warrant any of that kind of stuff. So
yeah, and that relates to that issue of nobody being perfect. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, if we're going to fire everybody who made a mistake, we're not going to have anybody working for us. And we shouldn't be there either. Right.
Exactly it. Another one that Nick had put in the chat, which is actually, I've read that book, Good to Great. That's another good one too. For those of you guys looking for some good leadership books. Yeah. Having the right people in the right seats and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yep. Emotional intelligence. Tom mentions that, and that's absolutely true. Mm-hmm. And I did see Martina mention this. You don't have to be Mr. Atlas and save the world by yourself. Yeah, I mean, the fact is you're not. Any leader who says, "Hey, I'm the only one who can fix this," I would be very wary of them, right? Because that's somebody who is in the power mode, because they can't. Nobody can do that. That's just a false, it's a false premise, and it's not going anywhere good.
Yeah, that's awesome.
There's a book, I don't remember what book it is, but it's talking about not just importance of leaders, but also importance of followers. And I know sometimes a number of people who have the drive to become leaders tend to frown on following, as those two are the dichotomous ideas. But sometimes it's good for leaders to get together and sort of put together a leadership network and a leadership relationships where they're basically in a tennis terms setting up a serve to one another, where they're helping each other also lead and get together. Because if you, let's say you're at a concert and one person stands up and starts dancing and everybody's looking at that person and they're going, well, okay, well, they could be weird, they could be high, I don't know if I want to do this, it's too risky to get involved, I do feel like dancing, but I'm not so sure. Well, it takes a couple of more people who do have the urge and are brave enough to step ahead to join that person and start dancing as well. Well, now all of a sudden, it's not just one crazy person dancing. All of a sudden, there's several people doing the same thing. And the rest of the people who are more inclined to possibly follow rather than to lead are starting to feel safer in kind of embarrassing themselves or exposing themselves, feeling more accepted to try something that's different. So that's another important component of leadership, to support each other as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very important, because, again, it's kind of about trust, that you're not gonna, maybe everybody ought to be dancing, right? But if I don't know myself and if I don't trust others, then none of us are gonna dance. And I noticed a note here from, and I will apologize ahead of time, Nadine, I think. What many managers and supervisors don't understand or often realize, the company culture and attitudes trickle down. That is so true. Right? You can say all the right things, but what your employees observe of how you interact with clients, how you interact with other employees, that's what they're going to emulate. 100%. You can talk all you want, but they are watching what you're doing. Anybody who has a small child, doesn't matter if they're 2, 3, 4, 5, my granddaughter's 8. If you think they're not paying attention to what you're doing, right? That's a 3-year-old. They're paying attention to what you're doing. What do you think your employees, they're paying attention too. And you can talk all the good things you want, but if you don't practice those, they're not gonna emulate what you say. They're gonna emulate what they see you do.
Yeah,
And so that's critical. Yeah,
yeah, and it goes back to the old adage, right? Your attitude is my attitude, right? So
absolutely.
Same,
Yeah.
same type of thing. So, and then one of the other ones I just wanted to circle back to, Nick had put on earlier about talking less and kind of listening. There's a great line in the Broadway show Hamilton, if anybody's seen that, but where Aaron Burr tells Alexander Hamilton, let me tell you one thing, talk less, smile more, right?
Yeah.
Listen, right? Listen
Yeah.
to your employees, listen to everybody, right? Talk less, smile more. That's a good one.
Yeah, and you know, and I see Christopher has his hand up, but one comment about that, and that is that, you know, you can't be listening if you're talking,
Exactly.
and we need to be listening, right?
Exactly.
I see Christopher, you got your hand up.
Yeah, go
I was just
Chris, and
gonna
then we'll
say,
go
that's-
Trent after that. Go for it, Chris.
I was gonna say, that's the way we have 2 ears and 1 mouth.
Exactly. Exactly. For sure.
But additionally, Gary, talk about the influence that we have as leaders. Think about the shadow of a leader. I mean, there's different books and things about that, but more than just how we interact with clients and or staff, the shadow of a leader often turns into what time you're showing up at day, what your daily interactions are. So I just wanted to add that comment that, you know, realistically, your spotlight per se is on all the time.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
There's no break.
Yeah.
And the other thing I wanted to say is, you know, there's many different books and guidance on what style or what type of leader you are. And I found that I'm a empathetic leader. And what that means to me is I take the time to learn who they are as a people, who they are and what motivates them, so that I can pull out their greatest strengths and maximize our work to that strength while minimizing their, you know, their weaknesses. I created a little survey that I give to new employees that says, does this motivate you? Is it in your current job? Rated on 1 to 5. So I can identify things that motivates them, and if it's in their present, you know, daily work task. And if it isn't, I've got a big disparity. That's something I need to address. And then later on in that, I ask them, how do you like to be acknowledged? Do you like to be acknowledged in person in a large group? Would you rather have a one-on-one with me and or another leader? Would you like a gift card for you and your spouse at a restaurant? Would you like a, you know, a fishing, you know, gift card to a fishing supply store, or whatever it is? So oftentimes when I see them doing something small or something that's a little bit maybe beyond what their normal task was, or exceeding an expectation, I'll drop a $50 gift card onto them in the mail or something with a note, say, hey, I noticed this, thank you very much. You will get so many people that will walk into a fire with you if you do that to your people. When those same people that you know, I've worked with and mentored and done that with, those are the same people that I can call on a Friday at 4 o'clock and say, hey, I've got a client that needs a rush ALTA survey done by Tuesday. You and I can work together. We can get it done, but it's going to take some effort. They say, yes, Chris, send me the title report. Let's do it.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the things. I mean, and I know that because I identified my particular leadership style early on. I'm not saying you guys all have to do those things. I'm just saying that's my style.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, you're correct about, there was an author whose name escapes me at the moment, but he talked about being the kind of leader that people would follow into the fog,
Mhm.
right? And that's what you want to be. I mentioned Southwest in my talk, and Herb Kelleher was one of the original 3 founders of Southwest, and then he ended up president and CEO. And I fly Southwest all the time, and I couldn't do it during the pandemic, but now that things are done with that, and I fly west a lot because my kids are out here. Flying out here from Indianapolis, I almost always go in the back of the plane out, because about 45 minutes after you take off on a long flight, everybody's asleep. So I go back in the back of the plane and I talk to the flight attendants. And I have heard some of the most incredible stories about Herb Kelleher. Some of them are hysterically funny. Some of them are poignant, but the guy was an absolute amazing person, which is generally why you get on a Southwest plane. It feels different than getting on another airline. And he wrote a book called Nuts, and it really is quite an amazing story. Herb was the quintessential servant leader. There's no question about that.
That's awesome. I'll throw that one in the chat. Trent, and then we'll go Humberto.
Yeah, Chris took a lot of my thunder there with what I wanted to add to the conversation. But
I love it. No, it's good.
I recently just finished a project management training with PSMJ, and the instructor there was telling a story about if anyone's read with their wives, their spouses, the 5 love languages, right? How do you communicate with your spouse? How do they like to receive, whether it's gifts or physical touch or words of affirmation? And the guy that wrote that's turned that into a business book as well. And so how do you have that communication with your staff? And he tells a story of, his staff had just finished this really awesome project, and they were all in the break room high-fiving, and someone walks by the room, and his way of talking was, physical touch. He wanted to high five with everybody. He walked and no one was high fiving. And so I love that idea of how do we communicate with our staff? How do we reach them one-on-one? What do they need so that we make sure that it's meaningful to them? One of the things I live by, my mottos is I don't know what I don't know. And I've got staff that they simply want to be drafters, and they've been drafting for 15, 20 years. And I'm a relatively young guy. So I always tell them, I don't know what I don't know. You look at a survey or look at my field guys. I'm not out there on the field. I don't know what I don't know. You guys communicate with me. And when they can bring stuff in, we celebrate that for sure. Because I can learn from them as much as they can learn from me. And probably more from.
No, that's a great point. And you have to be humble. And I love what Jen says here. The flip side, all this good stuff gets you high turnover, high burnout, low wage, unhappy employees, bad reputation.
Yep.
So, if you're struggling, of course, the problem we have right now is we're not in a normal world by any means. People leave because they can make more money or whatever, but so it's kind of hard to deal with right in the moment here. But generally, if you got unhappy clients and unhappy employees, and your reputation either as an employer or as a company is not good, people are getting burned out, they're leaving. What happens is the leader needs to look in the mirror. That's what the leader needs to do, because you can't blame stuff on, we all grasp at straws. Well, that's because of this, or that's because of that. And it's Connie is absolutely correct. There was a study done a number of years ago, and again, we're in a different world, at least temporarily right now, that said, I think it was something like 85% of people who leave a company, are not leaving for money, they're leaving because of their manager.
Exactly.
And we don't recognize that because they don't want to say that, right? They're not going to say that. They're going to say, oh, well, so-and-so, offered me more money. And so we think that's why they're leaving, but it's not really the reason.
Yep. Humberto, go for it.
Hey, Trent.
Hey.
Hey, Gary. Big fan of your publications. I've been using them for my classes here at East LA College. You know, I recently got voted in as chairperson about 3 years ago, and now I decide to step down because I love to teach and not to manage faculty.
Yeah.
But something that I realized that worked for our department was having these student monthly meetings with food in front of us. And in fact, we're planning to keep those going, you know, having fellowship with the students at least once a month. They don't have to pay for anything. We serve them. We serve them tortas, tacos, burritos, pork tacos, pizza. I mean, you name it. We look forward to those monthly meetings. And to me, they just seem like they're always just around the corner because I'm getting up there and they seem like those monthly meetings are just coming by so fast. But that's something that I realize has worked for our department, listening to them, what's going on with the department, what type of courses they would like to see next school year, any issues with the counselors. So having those monthly fellowship meetings has really helped us. Like you said, I think you mentioned relationship building. I think that's exactly what it has helped us to do with our students, is just build that relationship. And besides just teacher student, it's actually, you know, more than that. You know, we dialogue, we have, you know, small conversations. Some of us are planning to travel to different countries, so some of these students are from different parts of the world, so we pick their brains. So it's a nice place to network as well. And in fact, we're doing it again. We invited CLSA LA members, executive officers, to come eat with them this month during our last week of the semester. So we're inviting some of the CLSA LA exec officers to come have fellowship with the students, just so they can network, lessons learned, get to know them. So just big believer of these luncheons. So just want to share that. And again, big fan of your publications.
Good, thank you. And you know, what you said is interesting, because not only are you serving, you know, there's a metaphor there, right? You're serving them two ways, right? Literally, you're serving them, but figuratively, you're serving them also, which is what servant leadership's about.
Yep. I love it. That we do it every year too. We do lunch and learn. So we do bring all of our benefit advisors in and go over the yearly benefit changes and all that kind of different stuff. But again, right, take them out to lunch. We took them to Lowry's this time for it. So, you know, you're always gonna bring them in and make sure they all attend when you give them a good lunch as well. So I love it. Go for it, Ryan. Now that you're done eating.
Yeah, with the bringing up the food, you know, one of the things we do at my office is we keep some cigars and maybe a little bit of bourbon and beer around. So when we land a big project or we get a big project delivered, we'll go out back and have fellowship that way. And it really makes it a team environment and a celebration that everyone appreciates. And I really like what Gary said about the few comments about upper management being down with their workers. You know, I've worked for companies that had poor attitudes about field staff, but you know, they are the lifeblood of this profession, and we got to start treating them that way. And there's some companies that probably do that very well, and some companies do it poorly. So, you know, leadership is about showing to people that you're willing to do any job that they're willing to do, and be right there with them as well.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's very true. Ryan, you knew John Schneider, and you know, there was more than one occasion when John was, you know, basically CEO of the company and something needed to be done, and he's like, "I'll get my boots and let's go on out." So that's you know, and that's so demonstrative. You know, that's what I was talking about. That speaks more than words that came out of his mouth.
Yeah, I had somebody told me one time, you know, the difference between an employee and an owner. And the only difference is the owner will take out the trash, right? Because he'll do anything, right? Does anything for the job or whatever. But yeah,
Yeah,
go for it,
that's funny, but it's very much true. Yeah.
I can attest to Ryan's statement about the bourbon. I was in his office picking up some targets on Friday, and there was a bottle of Weller sitting on top of the cabinet.
I love it.
And so he does offer that up. I'd also like to say that I think, you know, Gary, you hit it right on the head when you say, you know, look within yourselves. I happen to live with a licensed clinical social worker, so I've been around the block with learning myself and learning my triggers and what motivates and triggers other people as far as communication styles. And I think that you know, as you started out the presentation, you brought up the word culture. My leadership and my even hiring principles have changed so much. I don't hire on the things that I did 10 years ago. I mean, it is literally the exact opposite now. I look for the qualities that fit our culture and our company and our department, the people they work with, and I build from there. And it seems to be amazing how the difference that changes everything. I mean, your day to day, the conversations you have, there's nothing, you know, that's contentious that comes up that doesn't get resolved with a conversation. I don't remember the last time I raised my voice. I mean, it's just, I mean, other than a sporting event, that was about it. So
yeah,
culture makes the difference.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And of course, you know, what, and I'm sure people have heard this, is that, you know, if you hire the right person, you can train them to do whatever you want, right? In fact, they'll aspire to do whatever you want. If you hire for their technical, you know, their technical abilities, they may or may not be the person who is the right person that you're looking for. And that's probably kind of what you're saying, I think.
Yeah, I was going to say similar to that same line. I've hired quite a few. If you go to the tire store, right, watch the guys work at a tire shop. They're the most hardworking people you're ever going to find. We've hired quite a few people out of the tire shop because you've found that work ethic. You've found that, you know, kind of driven personality, that kind of stuff. If you want a good employee, grab them from a tire shop because they're good. They're good guys. So
that's you know, that's interesting. And you know, I bought my snow tires from a Firestone store here in Noblesville, and they switch out my tires twice a year, and they don't charge me anything.
yeah.
You know? And there's a young woman who works there who does it, and every time I give her a $20 bill, you know, it takes her 10 minutes to switch out my tires. I give her a $20 bill, and we're all happy. You know?
So Trent, to your point, I got a message 8 minutes ago from a crew chief. He's out of town. It says, I have a nail in my tire this evening, like up on 65. I got it fixed here in Lafayette.
Oh, that's funny.
So he's about the size of a tire, so he's not good at,
you know,
he found the right place to go.
Yeah, you know, I see a comment from Chris, and this is a critical thing that leaders need to understand. And somebody alluded to this a little bit earlier in how people want to be recognized. You know, some people do not want to be pulled up in front of a company meeting and patted on the back. They just flat don't want that. They'll enjoy a card or something, but they don't want to do that. The same thing happens with learning, right? Some people learn by doing things. Some people learn by reading things. Some people learn by being told how to do things. And if you are trying to teach them the wrong way, they're not going to get it, right? And then you're going to think they're a bad employee when the reality is you're not. You know, you haven't taken the time to figure out what does it take for them to be successful.
Yeah.
Wow.
Let's go for it, Ryan. And then we'll go, George.
Okay, I would have to agree, Gary. I've been married to a teacher for 40 years, and she tells me every student she's ever had learns differently. And she is a great teacher because she spent her time trying to put something in front of each and every one of her students each and every day that was going to be a challenge, but yet something they could conquer and learn from. And you know, I know she is a great teacher because she's retired now after 40 years in the classroom. And we'll be downtown at some event having a beer, and her students will come seek her out and talk to her. If they didn't appreciate what she gave them, they would be running the other way as fast as they could.
Yeah, exactly. That's awesome. Go
Yeah.
for it, Ryan.
If I can keep my kids quiet here for a second, but
No,
I was
you're
going to
good.
say, what about servant leadership as it comes to your clients? I think we're probably all accustomed to that, of going the extra mile. You know, for the people that are helping pay the bills, you know, we need to take that same level of leadership to our employees and everyone involved in our team. But servant leadership when it comes to your client, okay, I get it. You got to bloom. Servant leadership as it comes to your clients. You know, those keep people coming back. You know, if a client calls me, hey, because we do mobile LiDAR, and, hey, can you pull out the utility lines for us? Yeah, no problem. Okay, how much is that going to cost? Oh, we'll just do it for you. You know, those kind of things I think are pretty important.
Yeah, I've often said it would be nice to have some sort of evaluation of a client so we know who they are, how they want to communicate, and how they want to interact, because certainly some of them are a little rough around the edges. They're going to call you up and tell you what they want and slam the phone down. Maybe that's just their style, but it's very helpful to understand who we're dealing with, but aside from understanding ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. Lots of good stuff in the chat. Anybody else? Summer, did you want to say anything or no?
Yeah, I do actually.
Okay, go for it.
Yeah, no, so I'm not an RPLS, but I'm a business owner. And I really focus on leadership and trying to bridge the gap between the technical and the business side. My goal ultimately is to become licensed, but right now I feel like in the best interest of the company and the growth, that I need to focus on what this all means. And I'll tell you, it ain't easy.
Right.
It is not easy. It's a culture war 9 times out of 10, right? It's, you know, there's a lot of drama, there's a lot of politics, there's a lot of, you know, good old boy this or that, you know, but what I think is really important that you're doing, and this is the first time I've joined, and I joined late, but in this very short time, I'm going, heck yeah, you know, this is what you're talking about is so important. And these are the things that keep my best guys around and gals. Yep. and keep us going. You know, we stay lean, but I mean, that's where you go, you got lifers. And I really appreciate this. And I want to say thanks to all of y'all, because I'm really impressed. Yeah. I really am.
You'll be able to, I'll have this up on the website and on the YouTube in a couple of days, so you can go back and catch up, because there's lots of good stuff, even for the first hour or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a lot of good stuff in the chat. Thank you all. We probably didn't even get to all of it, but there's some great stuff in there.
Yeah. Anybody, I want to get Gary off to watch his granddaughter play golf. So anybody else want to kind of chime in on one last talking point? No?
Thanks, Gary. I love listening to you. You make it look so easy to speak.
Exactly.
And I know, having done a little myself, I know it's not. But I've watched you many times and enjoyed you every time. It's always a great presentation, always great information, and always valuable.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Wait, can I ask one more question?
Go for it, Summer. No, go for it.
Do you have any teams or shops that have their own groups, like, you know, chiming in as part of their, you know, as part of their curriculum, if you will? Because I'd like to put some folks on this and have them, you know, almost as like a mandatory kind of like participation, like a training.
You know, it just depends on the topic every week. If you go back now, this will be week 73, so you can go back and kind of go through some of them, and then kind of, you know, send me an email and we can kind of chat about it on the side too. And then
perfect.
All my stuff's on the Mentoring Mondays website as well. And we can have a sidebar conversation there, Summer.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Anybody else? I definitely appreciate it, Gary. Of course, always taking the time out of your busy schedule, and everybody loves to. We all love to hear you talk. So,
Connie put that note up there, and I'm humbled when I am invited to speak anywhere, but especially in a venue like this where there are people who nobody in this session has to be here.
Right. Exactly. No,
so thank you, Nadine, and everybody else. And if you're good, then I will jump off and go watch my 8-year-old granddaughter play some golf. And
that's right.
If you're interested, send me a note. I'll send you a video of her swing so you can learn how to swing a golf club.
I love it. I love it. Have a good week in San Diego, Gary.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Take care. Thanks so much.
Thanks, guys. Have a good night. Bye, guys.